speak up. Support the ones who do. If you're not going to speak up, support the ones who do. If you're not going to speak up, support the ones who do. If you're not going to speak up, support the ones who do. Vampires, they prey on your fears, so them not stay away. Vampires, they prey on your fears, control your atmosphere. Don't let them take your energy. What I say. Don't let them take control your atmosphere. Distraction away from your heart. I say, I am you. Control your atmosphere.
What's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Today is September 23rd. I know, I'm late, but that's okay. Because tonight, I try to stick to the schedule. I really do. But there was no way to get out of having this man on to talk with us about what's been going on. I know that y'all are very, very familiar with what's been going on with me, but in the broad scheme of things, racism, white supremacy, the powers that be, the shadow government, if you will, there are a lot of things that would love to keep us from any sort of justice, reparative justice, civil justice, tangible justice, anything that makes sense. So tonight, a very special presentation interview of sorts. I'm joined with my good sister Tieesha Essex and a very new person to me. My good sister Tieesha Essex. Sorry, before we get to Mr. Fogg, Mr. Dr. Fogg, you might have to, I think you have YouTube in your background. So I don't want you to close it because you might close us, but I'm gonna bring you back on stage. But there's a little bit of an echo. Close it. Okay. Yeah, you got you
That's
have
a lot of
YouTube
feedback.
running your. It's not feedback. He has YouTube playing in his background. Dr. Fogg, you got to look at your links, and it might be still on Safari, maybe, but one of your links has YouTube open. You got to close that. And when you do, just give me a thumbs up so I can bring you back up. But in the meantime, in between time, what's up, everybody? I'm so happy y'all are around and available this Monday evening. Tieesha, new mommy again, she's available. And tonight, I couldn't. Let me just say, she instantly popped in my head as a person to have this discussion with because of her expertise, her professionalism, how she's been able to bring you guys this information that nobody wants to talk about, and then to be how she's been able to bring you guys to be able to have a conversation with another person in a similar type of environment. I mean, you've been able to speak with him briefly, right? Hey, Tieesha.
Hey, yes, it's such an honor to be here. And, his story, I checked out Mr. Fogg's website, and what he has accomplished is major. And I'm thankful for you helping him to get his story out and to shine a light on this unsung hero within Black law enforcement professionals. So this is definitely iconic, and I'm happy that you reached out to me to help be the middle woman with the jargon. We're trying to do a lot of the jargon and the C stories, how I used to call them. But yes, definitely present a man who is worthy of all the accolades because of his accomplishments. So thank you.
For sure. And, the technology, it's never friendly to us when we're trying to have a constructive conversation. It definitely is always a hater when it's an uncomfortable conversation that will move the needle in a direction that makes sense for Black America. But I think tonight, essentially, it's an American conversation. We've got this ideal, our country, and then people who fight for our country. But then what about them? Are they forgotten? Are they throwaways? Are they castaways, left behinds? Like, what's going on? Because what I've seen is that, at least for Black America, we can fight till the cows come home. And then when we come home, well, it doesn't really matter. But I also have seen for veterans in general, you come home and okay, you don't have a limb anymore. Sorry for your luck. Yeah, here's a pen. People should give you some appreciation, right, for your sacrifice. And then, or worse, you die. Now you're dead. And your family gets what, a flag with
Folded flag
in a,
with
in a
3
box.
shell casings inside. Yeah.
Right, because that is supposed to make up for the sacrifice.
Mhm.
But it is a willing sacrifice. Black Americans have fought in every single war for our country, for our rights, for the right to be here. And what's going on, the real Donald? I love when you come through in the chats because you definitely support the military, but what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to figure out a conversation that makes sense, because inside of supporting the troops, supporting back the blue, right, we've got bigots with badges. And I don't want to tell his story as much as I'd love for him to tell his story, but like I said, technology is not being friendly tonight, so we're going to have to make it do what it do while we work things out in the back channel, since we're already live. But that's okay, because I know I shared bigots with badges with you, and let me just share it on the screen for them.
And in the meantime, it's perfectly fine, because this is what this showcases tonight is the generations in law enforcement. I have a book behind me called African Americans in Law Enforcement. And right here, what you'll see is a man who had over 30 years retired with the U.S. Marshals Service, as you see right there. So this is a way of saying the generations. He joined law enforcement before I was even born. And I'm sure we'll have some in the chat who have done 30 years, 20 years, 20 plus years, me, a decade. So this is just a meeting and a connection within the generations. When one retires, a new one is hired. And it's so important for one to take the other under their wing and show them the way. And hopefully this video encourages that.
Absolutely. And again, that's why you immediately popped in my head as a person of reference, a person to have this conversation with, because y'all know I'm not the authority on these things, or I know what I know, right? And then I know that y'all know what you know. I love that about the fact that we can take our experiences and not have to, for lack of better words, do crack to know not to do crack. Like, we don't have to do those things. We can talk, we can share these experiences, and then we can warn the up and coming crop or generation or the newcomers, like, hey, maybe you don't want to go down that road. And not because we're afraid, but because we've been there. We know what obstacles they're going to face, and maybe you don't have to work so hard to get to the outcome that you're trying to get to. But sometimes a lot of times we got to learn from our own mistakes, right? We got to learn from our own path, our own movement. So I get it, to each their own. However, tonight, well, I was hoping that we wouldn't have so many interruptions, but I was introduced to Dr. Fogg by Dr. Short. Shout out to Dr. Short. I don't know if he got the link for tonight or not, but maybe that's why we're having these issues. YouTube doesn't like when he has conversations that make sense either. But inside of this meeting of sorts, it was shared with me that bigots with badges is not just this cool little lingo. It's not just this catchphrase. It is a catch-all, maybe. And Dr. Fogg has gone through so many things inside of his 4 decades of service to have to fight so hard for what is his, well, like I said, it's an American conversation. It is a Black American conversation. But really, I mean, if we're all for the country, there he is. If we're all for the betterment and the advancement of our country, then essentially the people who are owed get paid. The people who are wrong have a consequence. There is justice, and we shouldn't have to wait or fight as hard as we've been fighting for it, because the law is the law, or things get said and they should be followed through with. But let me not sit on this too hard. Dr. Fogg.
Man, whoo, yeah.
Mr. Fogg, right? No, you liked when I did that.
Let me use my line when I come on board. Step away from the vehicle. Okay, let's get going.
So we've been having a little introduction of sorts, but not wanting to tell your story as much as we just kind of, well, fill the time. So without further ado, we've got maybe 50 or so people live with us right now. And I think that that's amazing. You guys, I don't normally start like this, but this is too important for you not to share. I need you to share tonight. You don't have to like what we're talking about, but you do need to let people know what's going on, because if you don't, and then it happens to you, and you were here, well, y'all know what I say about self-inflicted wounds. So, Dr. Fogg, welcome to my show. Tonight, we've got Bigots with Badges, which that's you. That's all you. But I know that that's not you as much as you've got a book coming out, right?
That's right. That's the name of it. Bigots with Badges, The Road to Damascus.
So Bigots with Badges, The Road to Damascus. You guys, I have his website in the background. I'm going to share it in the chat right now. And I think my lovely mod, I think he's going to do that too. But make sure y'all go here. It is so much information. So I promise it's not filler information. Everything that you click on is there for a reason. And the more you click on, the angrier you're going to get, because how do we have such honor and valor and esteem and, again, sacrifice? We've sacrificed for this country, and then to find out that the laws don't quite work for you the same way that they should work. So yeah, tough cookies. Tieesha, I don't know if you want to start, but Dr. Fogg, you've got this fight. How long have you been fighting?
Well, let me give you a little background on me, just a little bit of background. I'm a retired Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal. I born and raised in Washington, D.C. I came up in the Civil Rights Movement. So I was 10 years old, 9 years old, right around that time when Dr. King came to Washington, D.C. and gave his famous speech. Me and my brothers and us, we all went down there because we lived right on Capitol Hill. So I got a chance to see, and I came up also in Washington, D.C., segregation existed. So at the same time, seeing all of this stuff as a young child, and then having an incident myself where I later on at 18, I got locked up by the police for robbery. When I was a witness myself, another guy were witnesses. We worked at a store, and we just simply, the police officers took our names down as witness. But what happened was, when they got downtown, they got our names twisted up as the suspects and ended up coming to get us and locking us up. I make that point because in Washington, D.C., we don't have a sheriff's department. So the U.S. Marshals handle all of the local stuff in Washington, D.C., as well as all of the federal stuff around the country as well. So going through that local process, seeing U.S. Marshals, everything that I dealt with, and then that traumatizing of being locked up on the weekend, that Saturday morning, spending those 3 days in jail, it was just traumatizing for me. But when I got out, that gave me the real live experience of being locked up, having handcuffs on you, put in jail, all of that stuff, and not knowing for sure what's going to happen to me. Then I get out. Make a long story short, I end up going away to college with the Marshall University in West Virginia. Now, nothing to do with U.S. Marshall. One is spelled with 2 L's, Marshall University, and U.S. Marshals 1 L. But anyway, I went there and I got my 4-year degree in criminal justice administration. When I came out, that's when I started putting in for law enforcement jobs. And that's when that record showed up, Nolly Prosecute. Well, bottom line was, of course, I was flabbergasted and very upset about it. But I was able to go to American Civil Liberties Union and I wrote the President of the United States, and he put the American Civil Liberties Union on it, and they expunged all records. So I was able to start from there. And then, of course, then it's a weird way the way I became a U.S. Marshal, but the bottom line is I became a U.S. Marshal. I'm an identical twin, so if y'all see another guy that looks like me, he became a Maryland State Trooper. So at the same time, so we had all bases covered. And then I had 3 brothers, one went in the Army, one went in the Air Force, and one went in the Navy. And all this was during the Vietnam era. So you're talking about just a connection here that we served our country. Just want to make that very clear. We were a family that served our country. I'm from a big family. It's 9 of us, 4 girls and 5 boys. And bottom line is, once I became a U.S. Marshal in 1978, that's when the music started. And let me tell you something. I always remember when I went to all that training, because I want to get that straight now. I went to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. You get the top training there, and it's your training is perfect. And training is good. I mean, of course, you can modify it some ways, but for the most part, the training is good. But we come out of the academy, and I remember when I got my duty station in Washington, D.C., I always remember this white manager told me, he said, Fogg, you guys are all buffed up, looking all good. He says, man, I know you got all that training with you. He said, but let all that stuff go. This is how we do it here. And that's when the music started. This is how we do it. But anyway, look, I'm just throwing that in. But the reality of it was, what he was telling me was, there's a culture in place here. And as long as you go along with that culture, you'll be okay. You'll be a good marshal. You'll get promoted. Things will happen right for you. If you step out of line from that culture, you're in a heap of trouble. Now, we learned out later that culture is called the blue wall of silence when you step out of line, because we have a wall of silence. And in law enforcement, you keep, what is it? They said, whatever stays here, what is somewhere here
what happened here stays here.
Yeah, what happens here stays here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same thing with law enforcement. It's like whatever happens here stays here. And if you see something, and you see officers, now we're not talking about the criminals, the people that tell us to go out on the street and go out there. We're talking about the people you're working right next to. You wasn't expecting them to be criminals. You come out of the academy, you thinking you learn how to all the probable cause, all the arrests, when, first, 4th, 5th Amendments, everything, your rights and all of that. But when you get out, when you get into your duty station and you start to work, you begin to see things occurring on the inside that this isn't right. They didn't teach me this in the academy. They didn't tell me to say, well, if you got a suspect, and we got a culture here, if he takes off running, when we catch him, they're going to beat his what. And the culture says that's what you do. Now, you say, wait a minute, that's not that means we the judge, the jury, and everything else. So, and a lot of, as you know, and of course, his culture was racially divided. So now when you add the race aspect of it, where you see all of a sudden all the ills things that occur happening to people like us, then you start to ask the question, okay, well, wait a minute. Why is this culture like this? And we as blacks inside, why are we participating? So now that brings on a certain amount of post-traumatic stress syndrome if you're a black officer coming into that world, because now you have to try to separate out, do I go along with this or do I speak up? And
the go along to get along culture is very, very,
no doubt,
in your face. You go along to get along. And one thing that we have in common is that I didn't know, but I didn't put it together, but yeah, you spent some time in Brunswick, Georgia as well. And that's where I fell in love with Georgia. But also, I must say, my path was a little different. I was local and then went federal. And once I went to FLETC, and we actually had attorneys that taught us the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments versus other officers who got put in training because they could no longer testify in court or something like that. That made a big difference. And once I got back to my duty station, realized just how much they violated citizens' rights as well as employee rights, because not only did we have to learn the state code, the federal laws, but also we had to go back and visit employee handbook and, you know, employee laws and stuff like that, employment laws, to defend ourselves once we got back.
And you know, something that I would always tell my guys, and especially once I got into leadership and everything else, I said, this is very simple. I said, listen, you know, you often hear, oh, they need more training when they see that these officers have done something, beat somebody, done something crazy. I said, it's not about training. I said, we all know we do unto others as we would have somebody do unto us, but we want them to do that same thing to us. That's a very easy law. That's one of the second commandments in the Bible, you know, because if everybody dealt with people the way they would want to be dealt with, it would be a whole lot different. But the reality of it is, people say, look, you are, you know, one thing I say about the Dred Scott decision, y'all know this decision that when the slaves ran north, they came to the north, they were set free. And the white slave owners would want to come and get their property, which was human beings.
Fugitive slave laws.
And the white folks up north said, you come up here, we're going to shoot your buns. We're not letting you come up here to take these people away. And then that's when it went to the Supreme Court. And that's when Supreme Court said, a black man is inferior and he has no rights that a white man is bound to respect. So once that occurred, that tells you the culture of America. I said, a leopard does not change its spots. America was started on this race, on this white supremacy thing, that blacks were inferior. And that doesn't go away. And if you think about a great civil war, think about that. They went to war, a civil war where you're talking about the country nearly divided, not only divided, but nearly destroyed itself, all over whether or not you're going to be property in that free labor. So now, all of a sudden, one day somebody says, okay, well, you're no longer slaves, you're free, but don't give you any wealth, any generational, any means,
reparations,
nothing. Just say out, go. And then they set up police forces, and the police forces were designed because white folks was concerned that, well, these black folks going to have some way of surviving. So they might come and get our stuff. So let's find a way to put them back in a form of slavery. And that's when your criminal justice system came about and everything else. So now we as black officers, we get on these jobs, and now we are tasked with doing the very thing that the system is designed against us. But yet now we're black officers on the inside doing the exact same thing to our own. And then they told us very fast, I'm telling you, when I came out of academy, when I came on board, they didn't bring you on to lock up white folk. You had to go lock up black people. You got your numbers up on us.
That's I guess it's like like you were saying, the start of black people in the police force in general. I mean, for the most part, America's always been very 2A friendly, except for when it came to us. Now, flash forward to the Civil War, and they would not have been able to win without us. But how are we going to fight a war with no guns? There were a couple generals who went to different states and said, yeah, I know it's against the law, but we need them niggas help. And they gave them guns against the law and said, look, you fight with us, and, you know, we're going to take the consequences for breaking the law, for, you know, giving you weaponry. And then, like you said, now you're free, but no, we're not going to give you any resources to help you make your life any better, as much as we're going to establish a bunch of laws that didn't used to be laws. You used to could just be outside. Now you can't. You used to could just walk from point A to point B. Now you can't, especially if you look like us. So to our audience, to you guys, I'm very humbled that you're still here, because at the end of the day, you're not supposed to be doing any of this. Like I told you guys both before we even got live, the system works just fine. It's Y'all, it's us. It's people who want things to make sense that are actually crazy, and everybody else is, those are the sane people. But if we want, I mean, if we want justice, then we're gonna have to do some things that don't make sense for a little while, and it's gonna be uncomfortable. But that's okay. We'll manage. It's not gonna kill us. I guess if it does kill us, then that's a different conversation.
Dr. Fogg, if I might, I love how you brought that up because you made me think about something. You know, early history of Black Americans in law enforcement, some weren't able to even wear a uniform, some weren't able to carry a firearm, and some weren't even able to arrest white people. So I wanted to ask, when did you first experience discrimination on the department, and what was that like?
Well, when I first came on board, again, you know, as a Black cop, it didn't take you very long when you begin to see things that you know have a racial disparate impact. You begin to see it early on, but you just kind of, okay, well, you know, you don't want to start making waves right now, but you might tell somebody, hey, this, why y'all look at y'all giving these people all the good assignments? We, for example, U.S. Marshals, we came on board in DC, they were bringing all of the Black marshals to Washington, D.C., because Washington, D.C. was a predominantly Black area, and because it was federally controlled, then they needed marshals there. So they brought us all in to come in to basically handle the prisoner movements and all of the Blacks that were being locked up and coming through DC Superior Court. U.S. Marshals handled all of that. So they needed us there. But all of our supplies, our work locations and everything were dilapidated. We didn't even have enough handcuffs. I remember we would take a group of people up to felony ones, you call them, guys charged with, you know, felonious robbery, murder, whatever. We taking these guys up the back stairways, and we got them handcuffed with one set of handcuffs on because they didn't even supply us enough handcuffs. Just all kinds of dilapidated working conditions. Now, let me show you a stark contrast to that. At one point in time, they started bringing white deputy marshals on board from around the country, and they were bringing them to Superior Court, working with us. And then white deputies came in and said, oh, no, we ain't working like this. Now, all the complaining that we did about changing and getting material, getting supplies, everything we needed fell on deaf ears. As soon as them folks came in there and started complaining, the director of the Marshals Service came down, met with them. They remodeled the offices, gave us all telephones and separate offices and everything. So you begin to see in every which way, when whites spoke up, things was different. And even when you make your arrest, I used to always give the example, like you stop a car full of white people in it, you stop a car full of Black folks in it. Whatever you say them Black guys did, your supervisor, everybody, your probable cause, whatever you said to make that affect that arrest, you're gonna get back. Everybody's gonna support you. The U.S. attorney, everybody. Then white people, somebody might say, well, what was your probable cause for stopping them, Fogg? Well, y'all never asked me that before. I mean, it just becomes a thing, and then you may get the target looking at you. Somebody says, well, you're not doing your job properly, or you're not using the laws properly. You didn't get probable cause. You shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that. So we learned real fast as a Black person on this job, your easier targets are people of color. Now, when you go through that training academy, and you would know this, Tieesha, you would know this. I mean, because when you go through that academy, after 3 or 4 months of that stuff, you're learning how to shoot, how to wear handcuffs and doing all that fighting and boxing and everything. Man, when you get there, duty, you want to lock somebody up. You want to put them handcuffs on somebody because it makes you that way. It makes you want to I want to go fight some crime. But then,
that's crazy because then you find out real time that we're not the ones doing the crime, right?
Yes.
Then it's like, wait a minute, hold up.
But you find out, you find out we're all the criminals. It's people like us that when you go fight crime, you're going after us. So, like, for example, when I came on board, that's when they ratcheted up. The omnibus crime bill was passed in the 80s. And this whole thing about the war on drugs.
Which is a war on Black people.
That's why you see on my website that when y'all go to my website, I put that up. The Ehrlichman said it. It was a war against black people. So, and we as black officers, you see real fast when you come on board, you see that we're just locking up black people. We looked at the cell block. Everybody was black coming through there. Everything was black. And now, I don't know about y'all, but let me tell you something. When I went to college, I came out of Washington, D.C. I didn't know a lot about drugs until I went to Marshall University. Man, they said drugs out there, yang.
The best drugs.
They had all the best stuff. They had Quaaludes. They was using stuff I ain't never heard of. Okay. And they had all these drugs and stuff. So you begin to see real fast that it's not about the crime. It's about the individuals you're going after. So then really the racial disparate impact. And so again, you had to slowly start asking yourself, am I perpetuating a system that is racially, has the racial disparate impact on our people? Am I going along with that? So I used to have to tell a lot of officers, I said, you might think you all that in a bowl of cherries, but you're a slave hunter. And
one thing you had mentioned was when you got to your duty station and other black officers saw the discrimination and the unfair advantage and stuff like that. Can you tell us, did you happen to come in contact with those who were not on your side, but I don't want to say the word on YouTube because we kind of get shadow banned for that. But did you have traitors of your own race that would just backstab you, go run, tell the others what you were doing? Did you experience any of that, or did you have those who are on board to fight with you?
Well, no, I mean, bottom line is, okay, you learn real fast that if you go against the institution, they will circle the wagons on you. That's what it's called whistleblowing.
Right.
And once you blow that whistle, and that's what we talk about, the blue wall of silence. So the blacks that were working, a lot of them told me, see, they didn't want to see me. I was the last person they wanted to see stand up to the system because they felt like I came on with a 4-year degree back then. I was tall, I fit the part. I had the voice, step away from the vehicle, all of that. They liked me. I mean, they white and black, everybody liked me, but they did not. Let me tell you something. I was most likely to succeed. That's the way they looked at it. And so when all of a sudden I started saying, wait a minute, we got to do something. We can't just be sitting up here perpetuating a system that we know that is racially open and open season on blacks. And most of the blacks saying, well, look, Fogg, we can't fix City Hall. We can't fix this system. And, maybe when you become the director or you get up to the top, you can fix it. And I used to say to them, well, let's say that when it happens to your son, they beat him down or they do something to him or somebody you care about. Will you say that? Well, let's just wait until somebody becomes a chief or go up the rank. No, you got to take action right then and there. So I was 7 years into my career. But to answer your question, no, a lot of African Americans, they knew I was right and they would tell me, but they just didn't want to file no discrimination complaints. They didn't want to rock that boat. They wanted to go along to get along. That's why slavery lasts so long, because you could always, the master could always get black overseers and they would hit you harder with that whip than the white man would. But they knew in order to keep their position, they got to make that, they got to be, tap dance and all of the rest of that stuff we do in order to, make people think that we're going along with the program. And so,
Speaking of fight, I'm sorry, go ahead, Eve. I'm sorry. I was so interested.
Before y'all get too deep in that, I want to share, this is like I said, tonight is deep. Tieesha asked if he was the only one. He's not the only one. I have here CBS News reports racism in the U.S. Marshals Service, and this is from Bigots with Badges website. You guys can click on this information yourself, but just to show you how long it's been. And then maybe you guys will see the severity of what he's been talking about. I'm not going to play the whole 9 minutes, but I'm going to skip through it. And then Dr. Fogg, if you want to comment on this after it plays, please do, because you've got firsthand experience on what exactly happened.
Alleges discrimination by the USDA in the awarding of loans and other aid. We look to federal law enforcement agencies to uphold our basic civil rights, but there are charges of racial racism at the U.S. Marshals Service. Just 6% of deputy marshals are African-American men, and now some of them are charging discrimination. Maggie Cooper tonight begins a two-part CBS News investigation.
Bill Scott was a highly trained federal agent with more than 20 years of exceptional service.
And now, Bill Scott.
His heroism was even dramatized on national television. But when Deputy Marshal Bill Scott won the 1991 National Law Enforcement Officer of the Year award, the Chief Marshal strenuously objected.
He called me and said he had better persons that would be eligible for such an award. It was only later on that I saw that obviously race was involved.
But to Bill Scott, it came as no surprise. He says there was a pattern of racism within the U.S. Marshal Service and filed a discrimination complaint.
This is my award from the United States Marshals Service.
Received this shortly after you received the 1991 Law Enforcement Officer of the Year.
Yes.
What is it?
It's a lewd picture with male genitals pointed at my face.
All right, let's pause it there.
You know, I tell you, it's amazing because that still hurts when I see him talking. Because I mean, we had to
go into that because they don't actually quite know your relationship to Mr. Scott as much as, look, on the website you're gonna have to go through, but Bigots with badges, but USMS Inspector William Bill Scott, I have him on your screen, zoomed in on him right now. He died from a suspicious hit and run. But it's not just that. It was a lot of stuff before that, right?
Right. And see, Bill, all three of us went up, myself, and there's a white guy, Steve Zanowik. We went up on Capitol Hill and testified. And after that, that's when Bill was killed. Zanowik, they put a gun to his chest, some guys playing around saying, pow, pow, pow. You don't do nothing like that. That's him, Steve Zanowik. And he's holding up a rat. See that rat? We before I'll never get the way the congressional staffers, the way those folks reacted when they saw him pull out that rubber rat. Because, you know, in the mafia, see, we deal with organized crime and all that. In the mafia and stuff like that, that's what they call you, a rat. But we're United States Marshals, and somebody gonna give him, and the man that gave him that rat, now this is the really killer right here. The white supervisor that gave him that rat later got promoted to head of our nationwide internal affairs division. The guy who gave him the rat. So it shows you the complicit, it shows you the camaraderie of racism, the bigotry, everything you're up against in a federal law enforcement field. And anybody that speaks out, your life is in danger because it's just like the military. You got to depend on these people to back you up. So as you saw in that video you were playing, and they're going to talk about that, where he was on making a arrest on the street, or they were on a stakeout, and the white guys rode out, the white marshals rode out and left him.
Wow.
And the same thing happened to me. Now, fortunately enough, the guy the very day that they left me over in Baltimore, we effected the arrest. It was an America's Most Wanted fugitive. You see that up on my website. That guy, 30 years, he went to prison for 30 years. He had escaped out of prison when we were tracking him down. He was on our 15 most wanted list. When we caught him over in Baltimore, he was trying to pull his gun out on me. I held his gun in his pocket, and I didn't blow his chest out. I had my other gun. I had my gun in his chest, and I held the gun in my partner. We got him subdued, and the other marshals that wanted to see him came. We got them both subdued. Now, I bring up that incident because I'm saying at the same time, right before we made the arrest, I had gotten a phone call from the manager at headquarters telling me the white guys who I didn't know, I was inspecting charge. I didn't know they had left Baltimore, and they went back to Washington, D.C. and was telling the boss, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm on a wild goose chase. So all of that was hanging over my head when we were making the arrest, because I'm saying, how come the boss didn't say to them, does Fogg know y'all here? If he doesn't know you here, give me a memo as to why you're here. Then on top of that, they telling him we on a wild goose chase, and we actually arrest the guy. So it shows you that when you open your mouth in fields like law enforcement, where we carry badges, guns, and all that, you know, you have the means. You talking about crime. This guy's holding up a rat. I tell people, I said, we talk about the Marshal Service has an organization called Witness Security Protection. Witness. That witness program was designed to, when the U.S. attorneys and them would go in and racketeering and go after these organized crime syndicates, anybody that they would get that would be witnesses, they would need protection because, of course, that they were in a reference group and the people would dime them out, call them snitches and everything, would kill them. So we had to protect them. Well, what's more organized than a law enforcement officer gone bad? That's organized crime personified.
Exactly.
So that's why my point that I'm making is all of this stuff was going on for 30 years. That video you're listening to, all that stuff. I filed this complaint, the class action in 94, and here it is.
24.
Huh?
I said, here it is, 24.
Yeah, 24.
30 years later.
30 years later, and I filed my individual complaint in 1985. We're going into 40 years. People was calling me Moses, but it's really turning out that way. Okay.
That's not funny. But no, this is our fight. If you choose to listen to the ancestors when they tap you on your shoulder and say, hey, it's time, no more sleep, it's time to work. And then you start to work, you find that most people around you they're allergic to work. You know, they go to work, you know, they have a job, they have zero issues with that. But then when it comes to changing the status quo, that gets very scary. And then I get it. People start dying, falling off left and right. What I've been showing the audience, you know, because they're brand new to this, maybe this interview with CBS, you know, I have 1,000 people who might listen. CBS is a mainstream media outlet.
Yes.
And this was on their channel in 1999. So 5 years after you started your fight, here they are blowing the whistle of sorts. But then why hasn't it gone anywhere? When you told me your story, I told you what I'm telling y'all now, and y'all know how I feel, but Mr. Dr. Fogg is brand new to me. Enough is enough. We can't be the people who are the moral compass, the people who will not be the judge, jury, and executioner, because we are doing the job that is prescribed to us, right? If you're the officer, you go out there, you take your notes, whatever those are called. Tieesha, help me out there. You do your paperwork, and then you didn't cross a T, you didn't dot an I, and now you're having the book slammed at you. And then just as a personal segue, I know y'all hate and love when I do this, but y'all, I was in traffic court the other day, and do you know that this person who might not have supposed to have been here because of their lack of English speaking was able to get off because the officer did not say that the open containers were beer or alcohol, as much as he put in his report that the person was slurred speech, drove up a one-way, speeding up a one-way, crashing into the median. All of this didn't matter because of the police report. And for this officer to have made his way all the way to court with this police report, it's just, this is the reason Tieesha's saying stuff. Y'all have no clue what people are going through to keep you safe. And then who's keeping them safe? Y'all see Dr. Fogg on the screen right here. This was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I don't know. My math is bad. Yeah. Class is over. My brain done checked out with the numbers, but 1999, that's like 25 years ago. And look at how young Dr. Fogg looks. And look, Black Don't Crack. You can see, hold up. You can see that Black Don't Crack, right? But we should not have to do it like this. It should not be this lifelong fight. As much as if something wrong happened, we should be able to say, hey, something wrong happened. Look, we got these laws, these rules. We should follow them. I don't want to hog the mic because y'all know when I have people on, I really want y'all to hear from them. But just real quick, Dr. Fogg, I want to play one more thing that you said from back then, and then we can bring it back to 2024.
Going against the United States Marshals Service itself.
Deputy Marshal Matthew Fogg, a 20-year veteran of the service, filed a discrimination complaint against the U.S. Marshals. He then also sued the Justice Department.
This is a culmination of everything that I've been through.
It's left deep emotional scars.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I looked at all my accolades up on the wall. It's covered with everything, you know. And here it is, I'm sitting out here and going through something like this. You know, it's okay.
Service was a big part of your life.
Yeah.
Big part of your life.
Yeah, I liked it. I really did. There was even with all of that I was going through, I liked it.
Now, the reason I played this is because of my introduction to your sacrifice. 9/11, this is a few years after this interview. He's talking to the news about the injustices, and then poosh, the Twin Towers collapse, the Pentagon, something happens there. You know, everything is going to shit, right? In 2001, which is 3 years after that interview, which is 8 years after your initial filing. And you'd been retired, or were you let go?
Well, I was fired in 95, but I got my job back when went to federal court, had a jury trial, and the jury slammed them and everything. And then I retired in 2008.
If we can elaborate on that, can you tell us about the fight? Because for many, it's so easy to just give up and go do something else and leave alone. Tell us what you went through, what you felt, and what fueled you to keep on fighting to get your justice and your career back.
I'm gonna tell you something. When I was fighting them, just before we went to trial, we went down to Miami, and this is he's a sitting federal judge now, Michael K. Moore. We had to go down and get his deposition. Now, why would a federal judge be given a deposition and an EEO and now the Title VII discrimination complaint? Well, because when he was the director of the Marshals Service, while he was waiting on his judgeship, appointmentship for the Southern District of Miami, they made him the director of the Marshals Service. Well, at that point in time, I had put him for a promotion, and a promotion came up, and I was at the top of the cert list, myself and another white guy. The black man just said, look, I'm picking the two guys at the top of the cert list. I'm going to make this easy. He, the director, had the authority at that time, because if you get promoted at headquarters, he technically can overturn it if he wants to. Normally, directors don't mess with that. They let the internal process work itself. But he stepped in and pulled me off and put a white dude over me who he claimed worked as a deputy marshal when he was an assistant U.S. attorney. And he thought he did a good job. And he felt like headquarters jobs, a lot of those jobs were already, were tainted. But, okay, well, you want to believe that? Yeah, I believe that too, especially towards blacks. But instead, he pulls me off, keeps the white guy, and then puts the other white guy on the list. Bottom line is, they get promoted. I don't. I add that to my discrimination complaints. Now we get ready to go to trial. And the last thing they want is a federal judge to be on a witness stand. Okay. So we're down in Florida, and they pull me off to the side after we take the judge's deposition. Video, I got all that. Videotape deposition, all that. After we take his deposition, the U.S. attorney, they pull me outside and said, Mr. Fogg, we think we got an offer you cannot refuse. Okay. So we go into a room, 3 U.S. attorneys and my attorney. Make a long story short, we're in the room, and in mediation, you can basically say anything. I mean, you can, because you're just trying to get a resolution. But to make a long story short, at one point, my attorney said, look, Mr. Fogg, I looked over what they're offering you. He said, had the paperwork. He said, it looks pretty good. He said, but this is your choice. So I was going to sign, but I said, listen, because the U.S. attorney, he said, Mr. Fogg, I said to him, sir, I want you to do one other thing when I signed this. He said, what's that? I said, I want you to admit that the organization systemically is doing the same thing to the other blacks on this job, and that y'all will work, we will get together, sit down and work out ways we can make this thing equal for everybody. He rubbed his hair back and looked around the room, and he said, why are you concerned about those other blacks? He said, don't you know you need to take care of you? He said, listen, you filed this thing in 1985. It's now 1990. It's been 13 years, man. He said, it's time. And everything he was saying to me, friends, family, everybody said to me, you cannot win this battle. They're going to drag it out. It's time you get your job back. I had been fired and everything. I had gone through everything. And now he's saying this to me. And I started thinking, you know, Matthew, maybe I felt like God had called me into this thing. But I began to say, you know, Matthew, maybe he's right. Your fiance done left you. Everybody done poured out on you, man. So I said, give me the papers. And he slid the papers across the room, and I was getting ready to sign them. He walked around. He made a mistake. He put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, Mr. Fogg, you're making a very wise decision. He said, you remind me of a black female. She was just like you. He said, and I represent the government against her. He said, and she wanted to fix the system, and we made her a great offer, and she did not take our offer. He said, and she took us into court and lost everything she had. Now, that was supposed to hit me like a ton of bricks and make me see with lightning.
Your tactic.
Well, yeah, but I mean, after 13 years and him making that statement, I could see this stuff happening. But it had the opposite effect on me. It's like God drew me back in and said, this ain't about you anyway, Matthew. I didn't bring you in here for you. Because you could have been gone to the top and done things on your merits. But no, you're like a Moses. You're standing in the gap for those, the downtrodden, those. So I looked at him, and when I looked back at him, I saw an incident where I couldn't get in that Washington, D.C. bus stop because of the segregation when I was a kid. And I went home to ask my mother, why wouldn't they let us in? And tears rolled down my mother's face as she was trying to explain to me that there were laws out here. We had to do what these laws told us to do. She says, but they're abomination before God. And then she said, don't you ever let nobody tell you you're not as good as any other kid. Well, at the time, I didn't understand. I saw them tears coming out of her face. I was very upset because I couldn't understand why she was crying. Later on, then everything started coming to me. So on that moment, when I looked up at him, after he made that statement to me in that room and said, that woman lost everything she had. When I looked back at him, I saw those tears roll down my mother's face. And suddenly, as Whitney Houston sings that song, give me one moment in time when I'm racing with destiny. All my hopes and dreams are a heartbeat away. And all of a sudden, it's coming to me now. And I looked at him, I said, man, let me tell you something. You didn't put me on this job, God did. I said, and let me tell you something. I said, I don't know who she is. I said, but I can tell you here and now, this one's for her. You take me into court and so will it be yours. And everybody froze. They stopped. My attorney tapped me on the shoulder. He said, Fogg, you said what you had to say. He said, let's go. And we got up and we walked out there. Now, I admit, it was 2 months before we went to trial. I was walking down the streets of Miami. I'm ready to head back home, but I'm crying, tears rolling down my face because I'm thinking, my God, what have I done? And then 2 months later, we win one of the largest ever victories, jury verdicts against the U.S. Department of Justice. They awarded me $4 million. They made me a chief deputy. They promoted me, everything. But then the courts turned on me. So you see what I found, and here it is today. We're still battling all of this stuff. And I found out that the battle never ends. America is a very divided country, no matter how you want to cut it. It's still very racist. That's why we got the things that are going on today. It is super racist, and it's racist in every aspect. Not just law enforcement. We're just here dealing with the law enforcement because we saw they built one of the largest prison industrial complex the world has ever seen, and the war on drugs on the backs of African Americans. And us black officers are the ones who participated in it. And I tell black captains and generals and majors and all these people who think they're all that in a bowl of cherries, I said you was a slave hunter. If you was a black law enforcement officer in America, you were a slave hunter. You're just going to have to accept that whether you like it or not. I said, because that was the culture. That's where that culture, and the same thing that happened to me basically occurred with what we was doing, our goods and services on the street.
What an amazing story. And thank you for diving into a place where I know it's not healed. There's a scab there, and just going back through how you said the PTSD, it doesn't just apply to law enforcement, to the military and those who deploy. It occurs across many different careers. Can you tell us about the birth of bigotswithbadges.com, your baby? Tell us about that. And then if you can you include these magic numbers, how U.S. Marshals Service math goes from 300 million to 15 million. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we got to get to the math.
Math ain't mathing.
The math ain't mathing. And
well, it's funny. Because right after I said that, I said, now I need to tell them about bigots with badges. And you just came right like so you can tell we're flowing. Okay, listen. So what happened was this. Now, the bigots with badges part, that was the mind kicker. Because that title came out in 1997. Now, it's one thing if I had thought of that and put it out there because people say, oh, he's a disgruntled, he just wants to throw out some type of language and make us look bad. No. The New York Post told me, Bill Scott, the one who was killed, and the white guy, they was going to do a story on us, and right along with a lot of other marshals. But it's because of us, they wanted to do the story. We thought we was going to be on the 50th page because, you know, racism ain't going to get that much coverage. We didn't think. That I'll never forget it. That Sunday morning, that Saturday night, the editor of the New York Post at that time, he called me up and he said, Mr. Fogg, the story is coming out tomorrow. He said, put your head down, incoming. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Incoming? I said, and he said, I can't tell you any more than that. The next morning, he's out there running in New York. I'm in DC. The white guy's running, Steve Zanner, he's running in New York, jogging. He calls me up on a payphone. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Matthew, I can't believe it. And the way he was talking, I thought somebody had got him, was beating him up, hit him in the head or something. Somebody got a phone call. You know what I was telling him? Pull your gun out, shoot him. I'm yelling, shoot him. Because I'm thinking the way he was sounding like somebody was hitting him and he just had lost his mind. I'm yelling, pull your gun out, shoot him. And he goes, bigots with badges. Bigots with badges. Fogg, it's all over the front page of the New York Post. They're going to kill us, man. I started saying, thank you, Jesus. I could not believe it. That the U.S. Marshals sent deputies all around the courthouse to try to buy up all the newspapers because they didn't want that stuff going around the courthouse and everything.
Wow.
That was a New York Post. It was all over New York. So now that was the coup d'etat because, of course, it said blatant racism, U.S. Marshal, and they did an investigative report pointing out all of the things that was happening in the Marshals Service. Now, when you read that paper, you would say, I would have thought the U.S. Department just would have got with us and say, let's fix this now. We can't have this type of thing floating around out there. Instead, they came after all of us. Instead, and so then what happens?
Wow.
Maxine Waters was chair of the Congressional Black Caucus at the time. They decided to have hearings. They called us up and had hearings on Capitol Hill. That's what Steve Zanner was holding up the rat. All this was because it was on front page of the New York Post, bigots with badges. Now we got these officers, 16 of us there, U.S. Marshal, DEA, U.S. Customs, Alcohol Tobacco Farm, FBI. All of us came up there to testify. Eric Holder, a black man, was the deputy attorney, U.S. Attorney General. And at the time, Janet Reno was the Attorney General. Well, after we testified and did all of that, Maxine Waters, that's on my website, you see a letter. She says, y'all showed great courage in coming forward to tell your stories. The public really needs to hear this. Only thing she should have put in there was, but you're going to need some serious protection because they're going to come after your buns for sure. And they fired every one of us. Everybody that testified on that, they either lost their jobs, their careers were destroyed somehow, that testified that day, some issue occurred with them. Now, that was where bigots with badges came from. Then 2 years later, I'm up in New York. I went up there with my fiance. Went up there to she was going to meet with her family. I was going to meet with Bill Scott and Steve Zanwick at the base of the World Trade Center, the coffee shop. I'm 40 blocks up the street at a hotel. Next thing I know, the planes. First thing, I couldn't meet with them because by the time I was going to meet with them, it was going to be too late, and the planes had not hit the buildings yet. So I said, let's just do it tomorrow. So we said, okay. Next thing I know, the planes are hitting the buildings. Hits the first one, and then it hits the second one. Now, in the same block that I was in, there was an Army surplus, just happened to be Army surplus store. See how God works? I went down there and bought black fatigues, pants, because at the time I was still, even though I had won my case in 98, they was on appeal. They was fighting it on appeal. See, instead of them saying, look, this man blew us out of the water. We got all this negative press and everything out there. Let's get with Mr. Fogg and see how we can fix this. No, these racist bigots turned on me left and right. and started turning on us. And these are people that work for the Justice Department. That's why I keep telling people, you don't look at the department, you look at the people that run it.
Yep.
Those are the racists. Those are, because there's no way in the world this thing should have lasted this long. So they turned on us. Bottom line was, but at the time I was out on workers' comp, I went in and got me fatigued because I had all of this training, special operations group, everything. I said, Matthew, go in there and start. You got to go down and help them people because you know them buildings drop. You know, a lot of firefighters and law enforcement officers are under all that rubble, man. And no matter what you feel, man, you got to go help them. And I never forget it. My fiance, she was crying and begging me. She said, why are you getting involved in that? She said, look at what you have been through. You need to stay here. They're going to kill you. You're not coming back. Because we thought America was we really thought America was at war at that time. Mm-hmm. And when I left out of that room, I always remember, and there's going to be a chapter in my book. I said, if I don't come back, you tell my family this is above and beyond the call of duty. And I left out there and she was crying. And I went down there and went in to start sucking in all that air and that dust and helping people out. Next thing you know, I'm in People's Magazine. Next thing you know, God is raising me up. Next thing you know, I'm on CNN. Dun, 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 and they call me, Mr. Fogg, can you tell us what happened? And all of that. But God was just saying, I'm going to raise you up no matter how much they try to put you down, because I have called you into this for a purpose and a reason. And so that's where that came from, the bigots with badges. So meantime, now we've got the class action that's still ongoing because the class action was filed in 1994. I'm the lead plaintiff. That class act. Now, I didn't have to file that class because let me tell you something. At the time I filed that class, I was really saying to myself, why are you filing this? These blacks are not, a lot of them wasn't supporting me. They weren't, when I was out on workers' comp and fighting these people and been fired, they wasn't calling me up saying, Fogg, we were just checking on you, see how you doing. Oh, man, they left me left and right. But God said, I got you. So let me tell you something. Once that class started going forward, then I took it and got this law firm that had it. When you see this stuff up on the screen, I got them. They took it over around 2004. I carried it for 10 years. In 2004, they took it over. In the meantime, the agency dug their heels in on them, fighting every step of the way, for us to get discovery, everything. But the bottom line was the lawyer that was working for the lead attorney for this same firm, Sanford, Heisler and Sharp, the law firm, they basically, the bottom line was they handled it. The lead attorney handled it all the way up until COVID hit. Right around COVID time, he died. Now, they didn't say he died from COVID. I know he had, but it was right around that time. I believe that's probably what took him out, but I can't, there was no factual, nothing to that. But the point is he died around that time. The attorney that took over it was the head of the law firm. He had made a substantial donation to the Harris-Biden campaign when they first in 2000. And he told us that he made a substantial donation to those folks. So that was a conflict of interest, because that if you're going to be our attorney, you're going to make a donation to them, and then he becomes president of the United States. Well, now you got a conflict of interest there.
Well, Dr. Fogg, I'm glad you brought it up. I had, well, this is God, Alma, the ancestors, whoever you pray to, working for me, divine timing. I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up like that, but you kind of opened the door. Why do you think a donation to them could have halted anything? Because to me, it shouldn't matter. I mean, who cares? Essentially, whoever you think is going to be president or best president, whatever, however your personal interests are, it should have zero to do with your job unless it doesn't. And maybe there's something to be said about that. But I hadn't quite asked you. I've been biting my tongue for like 4 days trying to not ask you this question before we go live. But why do you think that is? Because to me, who cares? So what if they supported Trump? Are you saying, not that you did, but is this saying that the powers that be don't want you to have justice? Like, what is that? What's going on?
Well, put it this way. That's the whole point that I'm making of the attorneys. All of a sudden, after the lead attorney died, the other guy, because he would have never went along with this.
So let's just to clarify, because I've been sharing in the background. It's a lot going on over here. So I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sorry. But Tieesha's been running it. Dr. Fogg's been giving y'all the data. So I feel like I've been all right. But I have been sharing what you've been talking about in the background. And so far, I have, what just happened? I have David. There we go. On your screen, you have the link from Pace News Online. If you guys are not already following Pace News, you should. Dr. Short's got a lot of exposés on there. And really, it's a lot of shit that y'all need to know that you won't find anywhere else because the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. But that might be why we're talking about this one point right here. Mainstream media, powers that be, all sorts of entanglements. Tieesha, I see you in the chat. Why wouldn't they want you to get justice? What's going on? Because if you're doing your job well, I saw all those plaques on your wall. I saw all the accolades. You did your job. You did your job and then some, because they gave you awards for it. They don't give us awards just for showing up. We never get awards just for being there, except for, when you were in school and you didn't miss a day of school. You get your perfect attendance award. But
well,
go ahead.
Let me help y'all a little bit. Okay, so this is the thing. The law firm was going in a specific direction, and then suddenly they reversed that direction. Once the other attorney died, this lead attorney, the head guy, Sanford, David Sanford, over the law firm of Sanford, Heisler, and Sharp. Once he stepped in, he just said, now he's the same guy that said this case was worth $300 million in 2008. Now that's what, 13 years ago, 14 years ago. In 2008, it's worth $300 million, and we didn't have as many class members as we got now. They increased it. They expanded the class to where they picked up all the people who have applied for the U.S. Marshals. All the blacks that applied for the job didn't get it. So they estimated it that the claimant pool was 10,000 people. Now we go from 300 million down to 60 million to 40 million down to 15 million. And yet the claimant pool is bigger. So what I saw here was this, that this firm suddenly is, now they're turning on me. It's almost like you're fighting race discrimination, but now they're complicit in it, because anybody knows those numbers are ridiculous when you're talking about the numbers of people that are involved in this class action lawsuit and the numbers of years. And then you fool around and get 15 million, and they're going to walk away with 6 or 7 million of that themselves. And they leaving the rest of us to distribute between taxes and amongst us. That's chicken feed, okay, for 30 years. So it showed me that for some reason, why did this firm all of a sudden turn on us? And then why did they turn on me to the point to where when I was the one, because they convinced the other class agents, look, this is the best we can do. I said, no, it's not the best. Let's all stick together and let the Justice Department and those folks in the White House, let them know we're not taking this chicken feed. If you're going to sell it, it's going to be something that's representative of the time, like reparations of the time that we have spent in the pain and suffering. You're going to do us right, and we're not going to back off. Well, these class agents decide they would back away from it, accept it. And I said, no, I'm not. Guess what they did? Then they turned around and got the class agents to come against me, and the attorneys did, and got the EEOC. Now we're talking the EEOC, which is a very compromised organization itself. I tell people all the time, the EEOC is not your friend today. EEOC is something that it works against us. It's like taking penicillin. If you take too much of it, it turns on you. Well, the EEOC is some penicillin that can turn on us. Okay. And what has happened now is the EEOC judge, she turns around and accepts the fact that and asks the judge to remove me as a class agent. Now the law firm had told us all, they said, they said, if Mr. Fogg don't go along with this, we can always ask the EEOC judge to remove him. Well, that's retaliation. You are my attorneys. You're supposed to be looking out for me, not trying to be. One day you're advocating for me, the next day you're against me. Come on, that breaks all attorney regulations, procedures. But that's what they did, and so they ended up kicking me off. That's where you saw the Pace News saying where I was removed, and the class agents, those other black class agents, sold out, and they sold out really the 10,000 because the bottom line is the class agents will get more money. Where they got the formula set up, class agents will get more money than the other members will get. But the most they're going to get is maybe around 60. It's going to be definitely less than three figures, 100,000.
Oh yeah, no, I was doing the math on the original lawsuit. It was 13 of you guys, you plus 12 others, or was you plus 11 others?
Yeah. Well, no, the original was just me alone. Then later on, we added other class members. And
so then, just with that, just the simple math with there, 300 million out of 13, everybody comes home with a couple million after you pay the lawyers.
No, not out of no. You got to go with the whole class. Just the class agents is 13 to 15 of us.
Right, but then I've got the 10,000 that got added.
Right, yeah.
Right. I was getting there. So then you add 10,000 more people to that, and everybody goes home with less than what a public school teacher makes in a year.
Right.
And as much as we need to get paid more, I just think that your years of service and the
you were robbed. He was robbed.
Robbed 100%.
He was robbed. He was robbed of his youth. He was robbed of having a satisfying. I mean, he has his retirement, but he essentially fought two jobs. He fought crime out in the street, but also fought crime, behind the badge. It's crazy. It's crazy. So you were definitely cheated, and whatever they've done to dilute the amount, you won't be made whole, because isn't the part of EEOC is to make you whole again, and that ain't even making you a fraction of being whole at all.
And that's why I think the public is so important for the public to go to my website, support me. I've got attorneys now, different attorneys now that are representing me and representing the class. I need support. I need help. I need money. And if you can see, I said 50,000 is my ceiling, but I mean, right now I'm not getting very much at all. So I'm just saying, man, people can come in there, man, and $100, $20, whatever they want to put in to help us get this thing going. And then at the same time, I'm going to call a press conference before the elections. I think if we do this, the Biden-Harris administration will say, Mr. Fogg, let's have a conversation and determine how we can fix this and how can we fix policing in America. Because we need whistleblower protections. Now, I tell people all the time, you're not going to get this racism and bigotry to stop in law enforcement until you get whistleblower protections for law enforcement. To give you an example, everybody saw what happened to George Floyd. They saw that guy literally take his time and kill him over a 10 to 12 minute period, whatever time it was to kill him, with his knee on his neck. Now, we all saw, the whole world came out and protested and everything else. Now, let me give you an example. If, let's say, one of those officers that was there, man, I'm sure some of them saw this officer doing what he did and knew that officer was out of line and that was excessive force. But he was a command officer. If one of them had jumped up and pushed him off, man, that's too much force. You're killing the man. And knocked him off. And let's say George Floyd would have survived. He would have had some bruises, but would have survived, and went on through the process. They would have brought that officer up on charges. They would have brought him up on charges for interfering with an officer in the performance of his duties to subdue an arrest. So you see, that's what you're up against. So a lot of officers who are below, subordinates are afraid to do anything, especially if it's a command officer. That's why I said, they always say, it's just a few bad apples. I got this for the the Fraternal Order of Police. It's just a few bad apples. You're throwing them all under the bus. If you can't tell me who those bad apples are, they all bad. Because I can't be law enforcement. You can't have a few bad apples. There's a field where you have to have integrity above integrity. When you say somebody did something, people have to believe you. That's out the window for the U.S. Department of Justice. That's out the window for law enforcement, and especially out the window for people of color. You cannot believe anything when it comes down to what they give to the U.S. attorneys, what they give to the DAs. You can no longer believe anything, especially when black folks are involved, because of how much racism, as the FBI, you see on my website, FBI says right-wing racist groups have infiltrated law enforcement. That tells you right there the system is corrupt. It's a cesspool when it comes down to race issues. You can't trust it. And I tell people all the time, I said, the fact that I cannot trust it, and this website and this process that I have gone through proves it. Somebody says, how could something like this go on for 30 years and all the documentation you got there and nobody sit down and try to correct it? It's straight up. You don't need any more proof than this.
And I want to say thank you for giving us a peek into what you need to help you continue this fight forward. And I know, from my experience and dealing with, bigots behind the badge, discrimination and racism and stuff like that, you can't really put too much out there and let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. So I know you want to keep a lot of stuff close to your chest. So I know you mentioned earlier that you have a book. So can you tell us more about that and any other ways to, encourage young officers who are going through this discrimination and racism, who may stumble across this video and find you? How can you keep them encouraged, and how can we continue to support you in this fight forward? What do you need from the audience? You have right now to do a call to action for everybody.
Right, exactly. Well, the clarion call would be this. Number one is we need to get this particular matter, since it is with the U.S. Department of Justice, it's the lead law enforcement agency in the United States of America and in the world, to be honest with you. It's, the most powerful. And so what we need is the president, we need the president of the United States, and then we need to get people to come up on the site to write the president, say, we want this adjudicated and fixed in favor of these black marshals. We want y'all to restore Matthew Fogg. We want you to put this thing right, and we want you to sit down with Mr. Fogg, and he's got the answers. I wrote a letter to the president and I laid out 7 things to do. You'll see that in the first red banner, letter, class agent's letter to the president of the United States. I laid it out well, what needs to be done. I need the people to support me, because I saw that getting support from other black marshals or from those who are afraid, and many of them are afraid and scared, don't want to open their mouth, think that this has gone on too long. I'm like, racism never ends. Stop telling me something's gone on too long. That's like saying reparations. That's the reason why they don't want to give reparations out. Now, look how long that's gone on. Because if they treated people equally and fairly in this system, so what I need people to do is to come up, support us legally, send donations, tell everybody to make donations to this site, to join our organization, Congress Against Racism and Corruption in Law Enforcement, CARCL, and support whistleblower protections. I got it all up here on the website, how you can support, because any cop that speaks up, I don't care where you are, I can be in a little small department, or you can be in the FBI or the CPS, it doesn't matter. You speak up on racism, that's the death of your career, and maybe you, but definitely your career. So that's what we need. And I want young officers, and I don't want people to not join, because I have people say, well, Fogg, you might scare people away. No, it's not designed to scare you away. We want you to come on board. I just want you to come on board and to understand how the system works, and know that this system, the same people that it is, what's the word I want to say? The same people that become victims of this racism and discrimination could be one day your niece, your son, your daughter, somebody you care about. And it will be, because when you look at law enforcement and you look at how the racism in law enforcement, it does affect most African Americans, black people in America, know somebody that's been a victim of this system or been in the system. Now, I'm not saying we don't commit crimes. I'm just saying when you got racial profiling, the targeting of blacks, the planning of drugs, planning of guns, the lying, the test of lying, and all of the things that we do. And there's a spot on my website where I'm speaking about that right in front of the Justice Department. And I got a lawyer that comes out there and NAACP. We're breaking it down as to why this is so important that right now we don't walk away from this cause, but we make sure that our government officials, including the President of the United States, fixes this thing the right way and make sure we make everybody whole, and then we come up with the solutions that we have already laid out.
Absolutely amazing. And I thank you for that, because I get that a lot, is like, people are like, why did you go and join? And why did you join them? And you work for the man and all this. But it's like, I would much rather, I have a driver's license, I drive. If I have an emergency, I'm going to call 911. I would rather an officer like myself show up rather than, Chauvin or, Sean Grayson, those who have worn a uniform and done harm to Black people. So we definitely have to get in. And one of the important things I saw with other ethnic groups, such as Asian, those officers I've seen, they would come on and they'll be a liaison for their community. If they have an Asian business owner who speaks broken English, when they call the police or whatever, that officer shows up and acts like a mediator for their community. We should be able to do the same. I knew a couple officers who worked in DC, and they let me know that there were certain liaison officers who would respond to their community. It's like, okay, we should have that as well. We should have someone who is totally foreign, who has ancestors who were part of the slave patrols, who are carrying out these acts of violence on our community. So I want to thank you so much for not going through your ordeal and then going underground. You're very much in the light and speaking loudly about the injustices that you face, but not in a sense where, okay, woe is me, I'm a victim. You're continuing to fight for that victory. So I thank you so much. And I hope this is not the last time that we speak to you or get to highlight you, and we continue to highlight your accomplishments and get more on board to support. And so I'm going to turn it over to the host of the show, which is Sister Eve. Sister Eve, thank you so much for having me here.
I will tell Eve, when you're showing the website, go back. There's a navigational bar, because you pretty much have stayed on the front page, but there's a navigational bar. It just dropped down just a little bit. And right there, see those little things there. And then they can go to like press releases. You click on the press release one, for example. One says press release. You see it?
Honestly, that link is not clicking.
It's not?
No, your home, about us, the 9/11.
The 9/11, click that one. Did the people see the 9/11 one? Now then scroll down a little bit. Mm-hmm. That's me actually at 9/11. That's me there.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. After your 1999 interview on CBS and you had been let go in 1995, this is Dr. Fogg on your screen right here, still doing the work. And why? Okay, that's People Magazine. And why? It's because, well, that's us. We are people who never stop working. Mm-hmm. You see him right there, at the right there,
right at the very front, leading and that's the body of a firefighter we got in there in that bag. It shows, like you said, and I don't want to call myself a hero, because I went there to do what I had to do as far as my training, everything. But let me tell you something. God said, I'm going to take you from zero to hero. You see, because I went to ground zero. And so you see, it just says to people, if anybody wants to say he's a disgruntled employee, don't care. And no, I showed that I stood up for my government. Now, do me a favor. Yeah, see what Moore says. Right there says where it says calling on public support. Now, yes. Scroll down from that one a little bit. That right there is, of course, that's the Steve Zanwick and us holding up the rat. There was, I think, some other stuff. You go on down. Keep going on down. That's me on CNN with Wolf Blitzer, me, and I've been on CNN and all that, law enforcement analysts, all that. Keep going on down, Martin Luther King song. That 13 black, this is where it talks about the 13 black martial class agents sell out 10,000 members, and that goes into that story right there. Back up just a little bit. They did the Final Call did a story on me, Under the Shadow of Death, Black U.S. Marshals, and that's me shadowed out in the middle there. And they did a heck of a featured story on that. Then you go on down. There's just a lot of information on this site that, like I said, has all been documented very well. You keep going on down, and then relevant files dealing with the class action lawsuit. I mean, the stuff that I filed in federal court. All these are relevant files. Anybody want to look at the legal documentation?
Oh yes, I've been sharing while you guys have been talking. I've been sharing the actual documents so that people can see it's not just that we're not just hearsay here.
No.
Here is your court documents that were filed in the court system against who it was against, Garrett, and how it's an ongoing thing. You might not have seen me clicking around, but like I told you guys at the beginning, it's a lot of information. You will have to sit with it. But what I will say for all of you ADHDs out there, for the most part, everything is clickable. You really can get to a section and be like, I want to know more about this, and then click on it. There is a link in there for you to click on to get either a press release or a quotable or an actual video. Dr. Fogg has done a lot to make sure that you have the information, and then what you do with it from there. I really hope that if you're not able to donate yourself, that you have already shared this program, because it's not going to be you that changes anything as much as it's going to be us. It's not just one person's fight as much as one person has to start fighting. It's never going to change without people wanting to change, but you can't just want it. And then for what it's worth, we live in a capitalist society. Y'all know that the dollar, it matters. It's how we feed ourselves. It's how we feed the machine. And right now the machine wants to eat us, Dr. Fogg, and anybody who doesn't want the status quo, which is go along to get along and don't say nothing, because there's no benefit there. A whistleblower's warning. Earlier, you talked about your fiance. You don't have one of those anymore, right? And not because she became your wife, but people start falling off. And it's very scary and lonely. And for what it's worth, you're not alone. I'm here. Tieesha's here. And no, we're not in the same state. I think we are all on the same coast, though. Shout out to the East Coast. But, we're here, and we know that like-minded individuals like us are few and far between. So when we have opportunities like this for you guys to get this information uncompromising, this is unedited, this is Eve with her 2 daughters sick in the background, and Dr. Fogg and Tieesha with her baby in the background. This is life, lifing, but nothing's gonna stand in between you guys having the opportunity to say it with your chest. I can't say that I've ever wanted you to do anything more than just be who you say you are. If this shit matters, then I'll see it, because his GoFundMe will go from 248 raised to 50,000 raised. I mean, 50,000 is not all. It's going to cost a lot, but you've already been spending years. People want to quantify our time. Years.
Right.
That's time that you're never going to get back, like Tieesha said. So, we try not to belabor anything, but you guys, the GoFundMe has been shared a bunch of times in the chat. I think, if we were going to warn anybody, or if I was going to warn anybody, it's, look, if you say it matters, you're going to have to mean it. But when you mean it, you will find other people who mean it. And then, well, watch God work, right? Some of y'all ain't believers though. So, maybe it's going to take a little while. But Dr. Fogg, you are more than welcome to come back on my channel. I know Tieesha would love to have you on her channel. So don't think this is the last time or anything. But did you have anything else you wanted to leave them with? I know your book is coming out, so it's not quite available for purchase, but I know we're working on some merch for you. Bigots with badges makes people mad. We got to put it on a shirt. We're going to do that. So if you have anything else you want them to know, now is the time.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much, I think we covered it. It's just the bottom line is what I want. And I want them to make sure that they write the president, because that's an email. When they click on that button, you just can email.
All right, I'm going to go back to that before we go off, just so that they can see it real quick.
Yeah, and everybody can do that no matter what. You can say, because once they start seeing those emails coming in, that's going to get their attention. Like, wow, you know, Mr. Fogg is putting this stuff out to the public. Everybody is seeing it now. We're just not going to let it sit over there at the EOC. As I said, the EOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, for those of you who might not know what it means, but they are the ones who were handling this lawsuit all the way through. But once you file it in federal court, then technically it's supposed to lose its jurisdiction at the EOC, because now you're changing jurisdictions to federal court. So why the EOC decided to keep it, that's another now story in of itself, legal battle, because it shouldn't have never stayed at the EOC. Once I filed in federal court, a federal judge should be the one to determine whether or not this goes back to the EOC. So you got a lot of illegal stuff happening here, and it's a constant processing. And I've just stood up to it, called it out on every angle. And once I've got lawyers that are amending the lawsuit that I filed, because I'm the one who did a lot of the legal right. I've represented people at the EOC. I've won up to 20 cases representing other people at the EOC. I've done depositions. I've done cross-examinations. I've done it all. Written decisions, everything, helping people individually at the EOC at the process, because they fall under the civil rules of federal procedure. So you got to know the law and how to handle it. And I've gone up against many attorneys in EOC hearings where we're going full-blown hearings where I'm representing somebody going against the agency attorneys who are learned attorneys. And trust me, when they see me coming, they say, oh my goodness, this guy's going to be off the chain. I mean, I remember one time we had a case and it was just like a few good men. It was a full bird colonel on the stand. And we was going back and forth. You can't handle the truth. Oh, you should have seen this. The reality of it is that, yes, I just want people to not let this go. Stay with me, tell everybody they know. And we get this thing to network out here across the country, the other law enforcement people and so forth, because I really do want to bring law enforcement together on the whistleblower stuff. And there's stuff up on the website that tells you about some whistleblower legislation that we've got in that we need support for. So if we get whistleblower protections and get government to start looking at these issues from a whistleblower's standpoint, what will happen automatically is it's like the cameras. Once they started having the video cameras, well, officers started realizing, okay, whatever you do and say, you might be on video. And same thing with whistleblower. If you realize one of your colleagues may not let you sit there and beat the heck out of somebody or lie or plant drugs on them, say these kids or these people had drugs on. You know how many people they didn't put in jail in the United States, young black men who they said they had drugs in their car and they didn't, and planted drugs? That could have been your son or your daughter. So I'm just telling you, you might sit here and listen to this and say, oh, I'm not paying attention to that. When it affects you one day, you'll get it. But then the same people will be saying, I don't have time to pay attention to you. So I just want people to understand this is something that can affect any one of us at any given time.
Absolutely. And just as a final nail in that coffin on your screen, director omitting internal racism, it really could happen to you. I hate the Mamie Till syndrome of our people, which is if it hasn't happened to me, it's not going to happen to me. And until it happens to me, I don't really need to do anything about it. And then, well, nothing disparaging to say about the Till family as much as, damn, if it didn't have to happen to you for you to have your son in an open casket for us to see it. And did we have to see it as much as you probably should have been listening to people telling you the same shit I'm telling you today, the same thing that Dr. Fogg, Tieesha, other people have been telling you for years. I mean, Dr. Fogg's fight is older than me. That really grinds my gears, for a lack of better terminology. But at the end of the day, I know that change only happens when people change.
And
period.
Eve, something else. And Eve, just to follow, just real quick, something else here. I want people to understand. No, it doesn't have to be that somebody gets shot or killed by the police. They could just simply be put in jail, lied.
Actually, no. Before we even finish,
anytime, huh?
There was one story you touched on it earlier on the website, and maybe it was Bill Scott. One officer was essentially he was locked up with the inmates on some racism, and the only reason that he was alive, again, I think this is Bill Scott that I'm talking about, so he's actually not alive anymore, but the only reason that he survived was because they had to go feed the inmates. So if they hadn't gone and fed the inmates,
right,
then
and the inmates told them, they said, we can kill you.
Right, and all of that because he got locked up with how are you a person with a badge, a gun, maybe ID and credentials?
He was black, and they just thought he was them.
There you go.
Assumed he was an inmate.
There you go. And because that is our reality, which is your blackness supersedes everything else, you can't be black last. You got to be black first. And when you're black first, you find that it's not a lot of us out here, but when you find each other, things start moving very fast. So, Dr. Fogg, I know it's taken you 40 years to find me, but we're here. And I know I don't have like this huge audience, but it took me a little while to find Tieesha, and she's here. And from there, people who listen to me get very uncomfortable when I call them to task, because you can't be over here and say that this matters and not do anything about it. That math doesn't math in the same form and fashion that 300 million to 15 million for 10,000 people from 12 people. That math also doesn't math. Y'all, please share tonight's show. Please share the website. If anything, if you don't share the show and you don't share the website, share that damn GoFundMe link. I'm about to put it in the screen for you. Like I said, you guys, Dr. Fogg is more than welcome. Please come back. Let me know that you've made $10,000 in a week. I would love to give that update to the audience that things are moving in a direction that they need to move in. And if you guys, well, like Carolyn in the chat, please, your stories, they need to be put out there. The EEOC has been shitting on you for every time that you decided to say something. Enough is enough. And when enough of us know, that's when things change. We change things. Black America changes things. Until next time, you guys, Dr. Fox, thank you very much. Thank you. I'm humbled that you decided to come here. Tieesha, please kiss that baby for me, and please tell the hubby I'm sorry for keeping you past your bedtime, but it was necessary. We needed this. We so needed this. And to the audience, y'all have been real. Do what you do. Do the things that you do and make me proud. Y'all have a good night.